Well, I'm here with my dear friend Mo Bunnell, who I've gotten to know. It feels like I've known him forever, but I've gotten to know him after the last number of 6, 7 years, Mo. And Mo is the leading, in my opinion, the leading professional services consultant in the space of sales. It's a dirty word in professional services firms, but it's become absolutely mission critical to the growth of organizations. And Mo has such an interesting journey to get to the place he got to. I just can't wait to pull it out of him and let you see how wonderful he is and how you can benefit from the real principles, that many of which are groundbreaking, I think, in how to approach the sales process, how to systematize your approach to the sales process, which he in large part put in a book called The Snowball System, which I have read twice and commend to you. And there it is. There it is on the video. Mo, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Craig, I am so excited to chat with you again. Every time I talk with you, I learn something, I have fun. So I was really looking forward to this today. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to start with where you grew up because I think it's a piece of the puzzle. Talk a little bit about where you grew up, where you went to school, and I'm going to ask you a question about your father after you get through that because I remember that video about your dad. Please.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make it brief, but I think it is interesting as it applies to business development. I grew up in an 80-person town called Preble, Indiana. I say 80 because I'm guessing. I don't know. It's not over 100, I don't think. We had a two-way stop sign, not a four-way stop sign. That'll tell you something. And it's in northeastern Indiana. The fields are as flat as my desk. And what's important about, I think, growing up in a place like that in the Midwestern areas, two things. One is you really develop this work ethic. Like people just work really hard. It's not that they don't in other parts of the world, but there was this roll up your sleeves, kind of get it done kind of mindset. My parents both embodied that. And I'm really happy I got that. The second thing I think is important for business development, as I even think about my mental framework today, is always proactively helping people. I mean, in Preble, and I'm not making this up, if you were driving past another farmer's fence and you saw the fence was down for some reason, you didn't call them and tell them about it. You just fixed it. You might not even mention it to them. Maybe they'd find out because somebody drove down the road and saw you doing it and mentioned it to the other farmer. But there was this proactive, just authentic helpfulness that I grew up in and around. And I think that pulled through our whole system. And I think it has a really deep meaning for around business development is that it's not about selling things in the negative sense, like you made the joke before, but it's about proactively helping people, rolling your sleeves up and always moving forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. It's wonderful. You know, it's those small communities that you wonder if today the kids there are growing up in the same way because they can connect to a community online that is so much bigger than the community that we were, even in the larger community that I grew up in Dallas. And then you ended up going into actuarial consulting, if I remember correctly, and talk a little bit about why you chose that path.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I went to our first ever career day at my little sort of county seat high school, and my math teacher came up to me and said, "You should go hear this actuarial person talk, this actuary." And I had actually, this is how I remembered. I think it was true. You got to sign up for two professions, Craig, and I chose FBI agent twice. I mean, there was an FBI agent coming to the school. Like I signed up to see him twice. So she came up and said, "Hey, I saw this. You know, you like math. You're good at math. You should go hear this actuary talk." I'm like, okay, I guess I only need to hear the FBI agent once. So I saw him speak, and you can carry a pistol. It's an analytical. You had to have a professional degree to become an FBI agent. Who knew? I didn't know that at the time. It sounded hard. It sounded cool. And I was set. Then it happened to be in the same room. So he leaves, the actuary comes in. She blew my mind. And not only was the profession hard, not only did it sound interesting because of the math involved, but she told me that actuaries' starting salary was $500 more a year than FBI agents. So that was like, that's all the thought I put into it, Craig. That was it. I was done. So I went to Ball State University, got a degree in actuarial science, took and passed all the actuarial exams. And it was near the end of that I fell in love with business development. But it served me well because all the stuff you learn as an actuary teaches you discipline. The exams are hard. I had to take 24 of them. Pass rate was like 35, 36%. 2/3 of the people are failing. There was like what I think of the Eagle Scouts or black belts in karate. There's like this mental discipline you have to persevere for multiple years to be an FSA, a Fellow of the Society of Actuaries. And I was able to get that done. And I think it served me really well, even though I don't practice as an actuary anymore. But I'm super glad I did it.
Yeah, I bet you are. And it seems like there's got to be some clarity of thought. You can't study. My college debate partner, who's one of my dearest friends in the world, is an actual, did the same path you did. And she talked about how to study and how you've really got to drown out all the other distractions because it requires focus to get those exams done. It's really important. So it takes me to the story of your father, which you do all these wonderful things just to, fix people's fences metaphorically. And one of them is you publish from time to time and almost weekly these newsletters, and sometimes you'll affix videos to them. And I remember the video of your dad shooting free throws. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you learned from your dad that you still carry with you today? I'm sure there's more than one thing.
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot that applies to business development. So this is cool because we're actually getting into the sales and business development content for professionals. Yeah. So my dad was a really good college basketball player, and when he retired, he wanted to didn't do a lot for a few months and wanted to start doing something to stay in shape. So he started driving from Preble, Indiana to Decatur, the county seat, and there's an old 1930s high school. Looks like it's right out of the movie Hoosiers. If you've ever seen the movie, it looks exactly like it could have been filmed there. In fact, the director of that movie grew up in that town, so it probably was patterned after that. And he would go up and shoot 3-pointers. So I know you mentioned free throws. There's actually 3-pointers. So he would shoot 3-pointers from around the arc. And for several months, he would just sort of shoot around and go home. Well, he felt like he was on a plateau. So then he thought, well, I'm not getting in the shape I wanted. I'm going to start shooting 100 3-pointers and see how many I can make. Good shooter can make maybe 40% in games. And he was able to get to around 40% pretty quickly. He felt like he was at another plateau. He got up to where he could hit like 60 out of 100. Now he's in his 60s or 70s at this point. And his goal was to hit his age out of 100. I'm going to hit 72 out of 100 if I'm 72, things like that. Felt like he hit another plateau. Get this, Craig. He moved to Dahlonega, Georgia to be closer to our daughters and my wife, Becky, and I, the family. So now he's up in North Georgia. And he runs into a guy that's working in his yard. He's moving some rocks in, doing some landscaping. He's walking to his truck. He's going to go do this in Dahlonega. And the guy goes, hey, where are you going? He's like, I'm going up to the gym. I'm going to shoot around. And the guy goes, well, what do you do? And he tells him he shoots out of 100 and tracks it. And he's like, oh, how many do you make? My dad didn't want to brag. So he's like, oh, I do pretty well. He goes like, no. How many do you make out of 100? Ask him point blank, like pins him to the ground. He said, well, I can usually, hit like 75 or whatever it is at the time. And the guy goes, oh, that's pretty good. I hit 80. And it throws my dad back, like mentally. He's like, what? Nobody does this as well as I do. Looks like that, he's not too much younger than my dad. Well, that fires him up to get off that plateau and strive to get more. Craig, his most now that he's hit out of 100, now he's 85 and he's slowing down a little bit, although he's getting back to the gym after some heart issues. The most he's ever hit out of 100 is 92. 92 out of 100 3-pointers. And if I remember right, he was like 82 at the time. Unbelievable. And it was all because he kept striving to get better. Sometimes his own idea, sometimes nudged by somebody else, like for somebody in the yard with rocks. But he kept striving to get better, and he would measure his success. He would try to get a new strategy, like lifting weights a little more. He would fine-tune his process. He had a way of celebration at the back end. Like when he broke a new record, he'd call me and we'd celebrate over the phone. he would celebrate every bit of an incremental process. And I think that story's super cool on its own, but I think there's something we can learn around business development too, is that it's a project. It never ends. You can hit plateaus. You got to figure out yourself how to get up to the next one. And I think that it's a neat inspirational story, and I think we can all learn from it to get better at anything in the world.
No, it's a fantastic. It's stuck with me to this day. You probably sent that video out 3 years ago, if I'm guessing, something like that, and I still remember it. It's because it's a metaphor for so many things, as you point out. And I saw something else that made me think of you. I think it was a little gift that was in my inbox. Because it was from Timothy Snyder, who actually is a Yale historian who writes about, his latest book is about Russia and how they infiltrated social media and controlled the Ukrainian situation. And then before that, he wrote about the Bloodlands, the area of Eastern Europe that was so devastated, and there was so much death and destruction during World War II and even before. But he comes out with these, podcasts from time to time. They're really just newsletters, and I think the one this morning was called The Elusive Male Smile. And I it's interesting because I don't know why he focused on gender, but I do know why, right? Because men, I think in traditional society, are slower to smile because, you want to be stoic. You don't want to give anything away. And he talked about 3 examples in his life where people smiling led him to be more comfortable in a situation, learned better, overcame obstacles, things like that. And I think, your combination, not to make you blush, of this absolute discipline that you clearly in part got from your dad, right? This ability to have a goal, constantly try to perfect the processes that lead to a better result, but also smile. Be easy to smile, because that actually helps you connect with people. Talk a little bit about the psychology. I mean, we're going to get into some of these principles of the snowball system, but the psychology of what you look back on now that you can say, I look back on my past, I think about who I am as a person. What psychological gifts do I have, or do maybe others have, that allow me to smile easier and be more successful?
Greg, you are so good at interviewing. And because I love that question. I've never, ever been asked that question. You're also so good at finding amazing content, like down the Timothy Snyder thing, because I can't even count the number of things you've shared with me. You say, hey, check this out. And every time I check it out, it's good. So you have a good rap with me around advice.
Thank you.
Well, let me share some science and some steps, and I'll apply it to business development too. There's a tremendous amount of research that says smiling improves outcomes. So in one study, they found that not only were meetings more productive, but they were more satisfying to attendees when people had authentic laughter in them. It was interesting because the study showed, I was just digging into it last week to refresh my mind. The study showed that attempts to make people laugh actually didn't work, but only when they did laugh. It increased the outcome. So you have to actually be funny, not just try to be funny, which I think is funny. But anyway, meetings are more successful and they have better outcomes when we have laughter. And I think that's, to your point, in professional services, it can be so easy not to do that, or to say that's not the point. Well, it actually is part of the point. The second body of research I'll mention is Dr. Teresa Mabile. She's at Harvard. She's coined a body of research called the Progress Principle. And what the Progress Principle says is, over long periods of time, similar to the meeting idea, different research, the most productive people and the happiest are those that celebrate incremental progress. So when we apply that to both things, to business development, I think we need to smile in meetings. We need to have a joke. We need to have a good time. We need to enjoy each other's company. I think it's tremendously powerful on the scientific side and the throughput side. And then over time, we've got to have a way to smile and reflect on and celebrate our incremental progress, divorcing ourselves from the outcome. We need to celebrate the idea we followed up and sent a valuable email to somebody we met at the conference last week and not worry about if they reply or not. The more times we have progress, that we figure out what we can control, we do that thing, we're always helpful, we're always mending the fence, and we're always celebrating our incremental progress. If we smile and do it that way, we'll do more of it and we'll be more successful. Craig, your thoughts on that? Because I don't want this to be a one-side interview, because you have so much domain expertise around business development and marketing. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're exactly right. I mean, any habit that we're trying to, and we'll get into that later, hopefully, that we're trying to create, which, sales for many professionals is not why they went to actuarial school, law school, yep, business school, maybe business school, but we didn't get trained in marketing and business development and those kinds of things. So we're really re-engineering our brains to want to do something that we didn't naturally gravitate to. And that has been thrust on the profession starting probably in the 90s, yeah, used to be when professionals didn't charge so much. It was a sleepier time, and you could, grow a long beard and smoke a pipe, and for the men, and just the work would gravitate, right? It would just fly through the window. And now, right, there was a point in time when everybody kind of looked up and said, wow, what happened to those days? And what happened to those days is obviously a free market, where a competition entered the arena, money, dollars entered the arena, and it drove more fierce competition and better professionals. So I think smiling helps us enjoy what we're doing. And if we enjoy what we're doing, I think your dad, if he didn't love basketball, he probably would have chose something different than a 3-point percentage. He would have chosen something else. But he loved basketball, so there was that piece. But he didn't love getting up when it was 30 degrees out and doing the thing that he felt like he had to do. So I think the smiling is important, and I think the other. I mean, you talk a lot in the Snowball system about authenticity. But it also, you talk about vulnerability. And I think, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, without seeming inauthentic, you can create those vulnerable moments with a potential client, a potential relationship, and and we jumped over the whole how you geeked out on the science of this stuff, which I want to get back to. But what's the science behind why vulnerability makes a difference?
Yeah, it's a big deal. So there's some research by Dr. Victor Ottati that he's found a concept of a thing that happens all over the world, and what he called it was earned dogmatism. Earned dogmatism, pretty complex concept, but it's a simple meaning. And it basically means that in general, the more that we have a deep expertise, the more closed-minded we become. The deeper our expertise, the more closed-minded we become. So as an expert now, actuary was expertise for a long time. Now as an expert in business development, I have to tell myself I know nothing about business development, because I don't want to fall into the trap of thinking I know a lot. Because if I do, I'm more likely to just tell clients what to do and not ask from them. It's more likely that I won't be vulnerable to them and things like that. In other studies, this is super interesting. People found they had deeper trusts when deep experts said, I'm not sure about a part of what I'm going to do. So we actually destroy trust when we say we know exactly what is going to happen. We build trust when we're clear experts. We say, I know X, Y, and Z. I've done these kind of things before. We're guiding the client on where they should go. But when one component of that, maybe something in the future, we might say something like, just real simple, you know what, I'm not sure how the analysis is this preliminary analysis of your patent portfolio is going to look, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what the results are. Well, there we're not diminishing our credibility. We're just saying there's this thing out in the future that we can't wait to to see what the results are. And that A, builds trust, and B, builds curiosity in the other side, which is science has found as an intrinsic motivator. We want to feel curious. We attend more meetings we feel curious about. We don't cancel. So if I can have the secret weapon of having credibility, but sharing something that I'm unsure about in the future, I not only build deeper trust with the other side, but there's a higher likelihood they're going to be excited about attending the next meeting. So they see the results too, and we get sort of a double win for that. That's in a way, I'm tying back to vulnerability to put a bow on it. I want to be clear that vulnerability doesn't mean we say, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing here. That's not it, right? That's not where you were going. And I wanted to make sure people knew that. It's just being authentically curious and open to what's going to happen in the future. Craig, your thought, is that where you were going to go? Or
well, it's totally where I was going to go, and it's funny because I remember you'll be kind of I hope I'm getting this right, but I remember reading some of the quotes that you put in your book, and I was struck by one you put in by Joseph Campbell.
Yeah,
you remember the Joseph Campbell quote? So I'm at the time I'm in the middle of watching the Bill Moyers Power of Myth series, 6-part documentary.
So good.
So for the listeners, Joseph Campbell was a professor for I think 47 years at Sarah Lawrence, considered maybe by many to be one of the better professors for undergraduate students in the world. He was an icon and wrote a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. So here you're putting in a book about sales, a guy who writes about mythology, right? He writes about how we look at the lessons of various cultures and apply them into our daily activities. And I talk about that because I know you put some thought into putting Joseph Campbell into a book about that process. Talk about deconstructing mythologies. And to me, your comment on nobody wants a know-it-all. Nobody wants somebody who comes into a room and isn't listening, isn't evolving in their thought process, but they want an expert at deconstructing how to get to the right answer. Talk a little bit about that tension.
Yeah, totally. This is really interesting. I'm telling you, Craig, I've never been asked these deep questions. I've done a million podcasts. I love it. So one thing that struck me about that particular Joseph Campbell quote is it roughly says, tell the world what you're trying to do, and doors will open up to help you succeed in ways that you never thought possible. Now, he says it a way that you get goosebumps. The way I said it didn't give goosebumps, but you get the idea. Yeah, that was a paraphrase. Yeah. But that's so powerful because it ties back to vulnerability. And it ties into us having really, really deep relationships with our colleagues, with our other partners, and with our clients. Because if we can have deep conversations with those around us, both internally, externally, strategic partners, maybe other professionals you work with, other lawyers, accountants, whoever, and then directly with our clients, if we can help describe, here's some things I'm trying to do in my life, professionally, maybe even non-professionally based on your relationship. And then doors open up to help you get there in a way that the universe, and I'm getting mythology-ish here, the universe, other human beings will want to help you get there. There's a tremendous body of research that says helping someone else triggers likability. A lot of people think it's the other way. We help people we like. Of course, that's true, but it works in reverse too. And Dr. Adam Grant at Penn, best-selling author of Think Again, Give and Take, all kinds of stuff, and just incredibly insightful person and human being. Oh, do you have one of the? Yes, Think Again. Mine's right over there. It's so good. And the Give and Take made a massive difference in me. Adam, thank you if you ever watch this. But his body of research says that actually helping somebody triggers likability. It almost flips it in reverse. So think of this incredible, powerful tool we've got by when we can go to our colleagues, our strategic partners, our clients, describe where we want to take our life, our book of business, our career, the next stage in our professional career, whatever, anything. It almost doesn't matter. The likelihood they will offer to help us is very high. That triggers likability. We know from other science that we do more business with those we like. So we can actually win the relationship advantage by sharing where we're headed with the world and actually honestly and authentically and with joy receiving the help that other person gives us, because it has tremendous value to deepen our relationship and to help us achieve our goals, and other people feel like they're right along the ride with us. It's really, really powerful and something very important.
Well, I think, it's interesting because I think what Joseph Campbell to me, and for those who don't know him, apologies for this deeper dive into somebody who may be unfamiliar to a lot of people, because he passed away 30 years ago.
Right.
But he's written some incredible stuff. But he deconstructed the mythologies of our civilization to try to explain how we ought to be living our lives, right? And you did, not to get too grandiose about what you're doing, but what you did was you took, and I'll shorten it because you've told this story so many times, but you took an opportunity where somebody put into your lap the biggest client for your consulting firm, a huge consulting firm, I might add, and they said, we want you to manage this relationship. And you're like, holy crap, like, how do I do this? So what did you do? You dove deep into the infrastructure, like the scaffolding around sales, the psychology, the science behind how humans behave towards each other. So when I saw the Joseph Campbell quote in your book, I'm like, that has significance, because that's essentially what Campbell's trying to do. So talk a little bit about what your process, like, how did you organize the science around performance? Because that's clearly what you did. You got your own PhD in the science of performance. Talk a little bit about how because I just think people will find that interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'll tie it to Joseph Campbell. So in that Hero of a Thousand Faces, like you quoted, it's an immensely valuable book. It is heavy, but it is so valuable. Joseph Campbell has recreated and decoded something that he calls the hero's journey. And it has three parts. It's sort of like the 3-act play. There's the call, there's the conflict, and there's the conclusion. The call is I realize I need to do, reluctantly typically realize I need to do something really big. The conflict is the battle. It's the diving deep. It's the sweat. It's the sleeves rolled up. It's, are you going to win or lose? You're not sure. You end up winning in the end, hopefully. And then the conclusion is what it became. My call, conflict, and conclusion happened. The biggest one in my life is when I finished that last actuarial exam. I got promoted to help manage some of the largest clients at our firm, is like you said. And I really thought, Craig, that there would be a manual. My new boss, I had a new boss, a new floor, new business cards, new titles, new roles. All my the things I would get paid on with a bonus went from billable time and collegiality and client satisfaction completely flipped in one day to originations and client growth and retention and growing a book of business. And I thought I would get that manual to fill the gap. I was used to studying. I was used to giving piles of paper and memorize this and pass the test. And I went to Michael and asked him for the manual. And on my first day, I had not done my due diligence, and I wasn't prepared for him laughing out loud at me, which he did. Talk about laughter. This was not good laughter. Yeah. And he slapped me on the back and in a polite way, but he said, Mo, there's no manual for business development. We all just figured out myself. Treat the client right. You're going to do great. And at that moment, that's when the call happened, the reluctant call, because I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back with the tail in between my legs as a failure. I had to make it work. The boats were burnt in my mind. I had to stay. So that's when I, out of fear of failure, really started digging into the science of why do people buy one person versus another? How are relationships formed? And in the third part of the big three, how do we hack our own habits? You brought this up before, we'll get to it. How do I hack my own habits to be successful even if I'm really busy? And it was through interviewing people, trial and error, testing things on myself, but I really felt like I struck gold when I got into the peer-reviewed research that I've been quoting, like the science of how this stuff works with legitimacy and validity. And it was through that and cobbling together a system for myself that at some point, a little over 15 years ago, I realized other people want the system. And the thing I built for myself, the manual that I wanted, I basically created. And that's when I went off on my own and started Bunnell Idea Group. And now, like you, 20,000 other people have gone through the training. So that was difficult, man. And now it's a couple decades of working on that one thing. But that's really my hero's journey is I want to tell myself every day, I know nothing about business development. I need to learn more. It's the project that never ends. And I just keep taking notes and tweaking and testing and always evolving what I'm doing and what we're teaching others. So is that where you wanted to go on that one?
Oh, listen, anything you say is gold, but it's exactly where I wanted to go. I mean, and in fact, I'll make you blush because I don't think we've discussed this, but you in large part inspired me to dive deeper into the concept of performance psychology. And as you know, when I traveled around, I would give presentations. I would to our lawyers, and we would talk about, don't be intimidated by business development. I would take a lot of concepts I learned from you and books that were recommended by you. And, I didn't realize it because I was taking, my sons, Will and Ben and my daughter, Lily around with me. But Will and Ben would be old enough. They would sometimes want to watch the presentations, and lo and behold, Will Budner in a month is going to the University of Edinburgh to get his master's in performance psychology.
So cool.
It's you look back and I think you deserve some credit for that. So it's an interesting cross-disciplinary science. There's a lot of science to this, and there's also a lot of instinct that you create by practice. Your dad's 3-pointers, he can kind of feel when his body is offline. And so anyway, talk a little bit. I want to get into a few of the concepts from the snowball system to have you explain them so people can kind of put them into practice a little bit. You talk about creating a raving fan, that really an end game is creating a raving fan. Talk a little bit about why you chose that terminology and what it means.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's funny too, because we do so many global workshops that raving fan, like to folks in England, sounds like the raving mad. So we have to, we have to tell them what it really means. It's sort of a U.S. centric thing. But we chose it very carefully. So we've got a lot of people think about a pipeline. If they do about their own professional work, they might think about an opportunity pipeline. Most people let that bang around in their head. I would highly recommend you write it down, and we've got 4 steps that you want to follow to gain approval for something. But most people have at least heard of that idea. They might not do it right, but they've heard of it. Hardly anybody has heard of the idea of a relationship pipeline. And we like to say this: a great matter, a great project might make your year, no doubt about it, but a couple great relationships can make your entire career. So this idea of documenting and figuring out how to optimize and how to focus on the right relationships to create a robust relationship pipeline is really important. So back to Raving Fan, we've got 7 steps that get to Raving Fan. The last 3 are probably worth mentioning on a short podcast like this. The 5th is solid working relationship. I do great work. I maybe don't keep in touch when I'm not actually actively working on a particular matter or project. But my clients know I do great work, and hopefully they'll call me when they need me. Then the 6th step is what we call trusted advisor. That's where, with validity, we know we're at that step if someone has called us and asked for some help, maybe even outside of what our normal expertise is. Hey, like Craig, you are so good at this. There's so many times you've helped me when I might reach out and go, hey, can I just bounce an idea off you? I don't know where to take this or whatever. Like you have truly mutually beneficial relationships in your whole world. You're really good at this stuff. So at the point we're helping them in a way that's outside of what we're paid to do, boom, that's where we're a trusted advisor. Raving Fan, after we've done step 6 so many times, we've added so much value both inside and outside what we're paid to do. It went at the point when another human being tells someone else about us, either they've served as a reference or they've actively told a colleague at another peer at another company that they should meet us or whatever. When they've raved about us, when they're a raving fan, that is the pinnacle. And I'll wrap it up with this. I was given a training class for some management consultants yesterday, and they've never been trained on this stuff. So I had them write in chat, about 25 people actually. How many raving fans do you think you have? Craig, I would say the average, these are partner level people, I would say the average was probably 0.5. Mm-hmm. Well, we talked as a group, what would it be like if you had 5 raving fans? What would it be like if you had 20? People actively in the marketplace telling other people about you, almost like a personal sales force. And they got really fired up, and they are on a mission now. They've heeded the call. They are on the mission to invest in others, be vulnerable, ask for help, have mutually beneficial relationships, all the stuff the science shows works to get there, and proactively be helpful and develop more raving fans. Because in a year from now, if they can have 20 instead of on average 0.5, it'd be a total game changer. Is that helpful where you wanted to go?
It is. No, it's like Coke. A brand name works when you sleep. And that was the concept behind the creation of brands and
Yep.
the growth of sales. And raving fans are your while you sleep sales force. And the mind-bending concept to me when I went through your training was don't confine raving fan to people who can send you work today.
Yes.
And I think because the big bugaboo in business development I see is time and patience and not trusting the process. And so you then lose the thread on that positive feedback loop that you talked about before, where you celebrate success, unless you're intentional about celebrating process success, because
Yes.
you might never know you have the raving fan. You've done all the right things and you don't know what's being said behind your back. And so, it's a really powerful concept. One other one, at least, I want to cover because I don't want to run out of time, and I've got a couple other things I want to ask you. Is give to get.
Yep.
Talk about give to get, and that fence, might be illustrative, right?
I'll do it. And I do want to add one really fast tactical tip to that last thing.
No, you're fine.
If folks want to build a raving fan network, relationship ecosystem, the fastest way you can do it, listeners, viewers, is just write down 5 to 10 names of the people a year from today you want to be raving fans of yours. Write those down, stick them on your wall once a month. Find a way to be helpful to them outside the paid relationship. Email them a TED Talk, give them a text, ask them how they're doing, see how their year's going, give them a call, catch up on Zoom. The science shows it doesn't have to be this perfect universal thing that's the number one thing that's going to change their world over the next decade. It's the thought that counts. So reaching out to those 5 to 10 people once a month over next year, offering help and asking for help will do incredible things. But it takes focus. You can't just let this bounce around in your head. Write down 5 to 10 names and be intentional about reaching out. So anyway, maybe that'll help your audience. Give to gets. They're the best. Give to gets are where you say, I want to do this type of work at this organization. I want to do this matter. I want to do this kind of project. What you do to win that is you pull back to say, what 30, 60, 90-minute experience can I offer on my own dime to that particular organization? My investment in their success might require some analysis or some work up front to have the, say, 60-minute session. That's our give to get. But we're going to offer them this investment of our time. We're going to ask for them some kind of investment, not paid, but maybe it's a data file, maybe it's interviews, maybe it's some kind of spending some time, whatever. But we're going to get their involvement. That's going to get some of their buy-in. And then we're going to offer a very precise investment of our time. And we're going to structure it in a way that they get to know us. They get to see us doing work instead of just talking about us doing work or talking about what we do. And most importantly, we're going to reserve some time at the end of that give to get experience. Say it's a 60-minute meeting. We want to reserve that last 10 or 15 minutes to talk about next steps, because there's a limited amount we can give away at no charge. And we want to be in the room when we decide what's next. So a give to get should trigger reciprocity. It should trigger likability. It should show our authority. It should feel beneficial or scarce to the other side. It should have commitment. It should trigger all 6 things that a guy named Dr. Robert Cialdini found is the most influential in the human mind. I just named 5 of them. And a great give to get lets us start doing work in a really easy way for them to say yes, but we're doing it in a very specific line of sight way to win the kind of work we want. So we're each going to win from this experience. Craig, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the next step on relationship building, right? I mean, when professionals decided that they need to get into the sales business, they would go out to ball games and play golf or whatever, right? Have dinners and things like that. And it would be that, well, I won because I've taken a client out to dinner. So I'm out of my comfort zone, which is important. And yeah. I did something, but what you're suggesting is, that's fine. Do all that stuff, because that's where you get the vulnerability and the authenticity and people see who you really are. But then take it to the next level and actually mimic a working relationship, which leads to something you described, I think, as the IKEA effect, or, this powerful concept. Talk a little bit about what the furniture store IKEA can teach us about business development.
Yeah, it's so funny. It turns out a lot. So Michael Norton and Harvard and another an all-star team of researchers, they proved out a mental heuristic in the last decade or so called the IKEA Effect. And the reason they named that is one of the studies, there's like a dozen, but one of them was with IKEA furniture. And they handed people IKEA furniture that were already put together. And then of course, great people in scientific studies are lied to all the time, which is sort of funny. So they think they're going to be judged on their negotiation ability. So, hey, here's this IKEA furniture. Go out in this fake marketplace with real people acting as actors and stuff, and negotiate how much you can. Get the most out of it. Leaderboards, everything's incentivized to really get them to negotiate well. That's our control group. Our experimental group is the exact same study with a step on the front end. You got to build the IKEA furniture together yourself. And it turns out that the people, unknowing there was even another group, the people that built the IKEA furniture themselves negotiated far higher amounts than people that were given the exact same furniture put together. So to paraphrase what the researchers found, Norton et al., is that we buy into what we help create. We buy into what we help create. So anytime we can get a client in a discussion around how we might work together, we're going to have more success when they get to pull some levers about what the process looks like to work. So, Craig, I'll do some super pro ninja stuff I don't always share on podcasts, but there's 4 incremental yeses to a great incremental buy-in. That this is part of the IKEA effect, what we call build everything together. The 4 incremental yeses we want to get as professionals are, what are the goals that we can paraphrase back the goal to them around how they want to do the work? Do they need Cadillac? Do they need quick and dirty? There's a lot of ways to do work many times. So what's the goal is the first one. When we can paraphrase it back and they say, that's what we need, boom, we got an incremental yes. The second one is the timing or the process. Okay, now that we need Cadillac, this has board level view. Getting into the timing could be important because maybe they need initial results before a board meeting coming up in the third quarter or something. So they tweak the schedule a little bit. Boom, they agree. Second incremental yes. The third one is the team. Do they just trust us for the people that are going to be on the team, or do they want to meet them? Does their team want to meet our team? This is more about buy-in. Is the team the right one? Once we get that, third incremental yes. And lastly, as you might expect, the pricing or the terms, the hourly rates, fixed fee, AFA, whatever it is. But getting a verbal agreement on that, really important. So when you get goals, process, team, and terms all lined up verbally, before you send over an engagement letter, statement of work, email, summary, whatever, they're already bought in. They bought into what they helped create. When they read it, they're like, this is the best proposal of all time. Well, it's because they helped shape it. And I think we shoot ourselves in the foot as professionals so often when we feel like we got to retain all this expertise, tell the client exactly how it's going to be done. But the problem with that is we're guessing a whole bunch about what they think they need. And then we have a high likelihood when we send the proposal that they don't like it. We could be off an order of magnitude in the pricing. And they just turn off, it stalls, nothing ever happens. They feel like we're so far apart. Let's not even try. In the IKEA effect, putting that building everything together model, sometimes you can do it in 15 minutes on a phone call. That's when we're getting it near 100% acceptance to move forward.
Yeah, it's so profound, and you're right. I think, the comfort zone is putting yourself out there kind of interpersonally in some ways, but another comfort zone that keeps us from doing things that would be helpful to this process are asking questions and being vulnerable enough to say you don't know all the answers on the front end. And what doing that does is you can reflect back a listening skill, right? You've heard the client, you've heard what they care about, you've heard how they like to go about things, you've heard how you can be more efficient through using their resources and leveraging their teams and whatnot. It's really great. Okay, so the last kind of core topic I wanted to cover is the habits discussion that we've alluded to, and you and I both, read James Clear, James Clear's. Remind me the title.
Atomic Habits. Yep.
Atomic
Habits. Yep.
I can't believe I forgot that. It's Charles Duhigg is the Power of Habit, but James Clear, Atomic Habits. I think he uses exercise a lot as a metaphor. I mean, just to timestamp this podcast, last night we all, I'm sure, watched, or those of us who are basketball fans, Giannis with about 3 minutes left. It looked like he just wanted to just sit down, lie down, go to sleep, like he was exhausted. He had scored, 40-something points. But the Suns stayed in the game, so he couldn't take a break. Like the game was not over. And you saw him go sit down. The coach called a timeout, a non-strategic timeout, really a rest timeout. And Giannis got back in there and played like it was the first minute of the game. So a lot of stuff goes into why Giannis was able to do that, right? I mean, genes for one, but a powerful habit-formed exercise regimen, a powerful set of processes mentally that when you feel pain, when you feel discomfort, you don't give up. So how does somebody looking at business development, Mo, saying, metaphorically, I'm not Giannis. Like I could never be Giannis. I'm not that person. How do they start doing the metaphorical, just put their tennis shoes on, or trainers if you're in Australia or the UK, how do they just get those shoes on and go walk a mile to start the process of creating habits when they've already got a full day of emails and billable hours and all that stuff? Talk about cracking a new habit.
Yeah, and we've even got a complimentary course I can mention that gives way more detail, different videos and worksheets and all kinds of stuff. But I'll cover some science and then some steps. The science is Dr. Anders Ericsson passed away a little over a year ago. You know his stuff so well.
Yeah.
Worldwide expert on expertise. And he found any complex skill. And I want to look into the camera and say this for anybody who doesn't believe it. Any complex skill is both learned and earned. He found it over 3 decades of research. For some reason, we look at sports or learning the violin, a musical instrument, learning a foreign language. We look at those and we say, oh, wow, practice made perfect. That person worked really hard. But for some reason with business development, some people can think, oh, I could never do what Craig does. He's so good at relationships. I couldn't do it. It's actually not true. Now, you are at 99th percentile. I'll say that. But a lot of times we can look at somebody like you, seriously, and go, I could never do that, thus I'll quit. The science says that is hogwash, absolute hogwash. Anybody can move from 10th to 50th percentile. They can move from 50th to 75th. Some things might not allow us to get to the very, very pinnacle, of course, genetics. But anybody can massively improve anything that's complex. Business development is complex. So it gets back to your point, putting those shoes on and getting started. So here's a real simple 3-step process to do exactly that. 1, write down your opportunities. We've got worksheets for this in this complimentary course that have it by stage and all kinds of stuff. But even if you don't have that, just pull out a loose leaf piece of paper and say, what's the work I want to do that's either in process or not yet? Boom, that's step 1. Get it out of your head. 2, write down your top relationships. That idea we chatted about before. 5 to 10 relationships. Write it down. Same scratch piece of paper if you don't want the worksheets. Boom, that's step 2. That gets your opportunity pipeline and your relationship pipeline out of your head and on paper or in a spreadsheet, whatever, so that you can manage it. The 3rd step is, I think, is where you're headed. That is to block off about 15 or 30 minutes once a week. 15 minutes will do it. 30 minutes if you want to add a buffer just to be in case. Let's say it's 15 minutes. 15 minutes, same time every week, exact same time. I'm a 4 o'clock on Friday guy. It can be Saturday morning when it's quiet, whatever you want. And all you're going to do is pick 3 of either your opportunities or your relationships, and you're going to say, I'm going to do something proactive this week to move that opportunity, and that relationship forward. Just pick 3. Bunch of science in 3s. It feels doable, whatever. If you just settled early on a matter, you had a case going to trial, you settled early, you got all week next free, pick 3 things that'll fill up 35 hours, 40, fine. If you have no time next week, you're stressed about getting your client work done, pick 3 things that'll fit in 5 minutes. 3 texts to people just checking in with them, not even caring if they reply or not quite yet. If somebody will do that, write down their opportunities, write down their relationship, and pick 3 proactive, helpful things they'll do every single week to move things forward, that creates 150 proactive things over a year they're going to do. And that will start to create momentum. Feels up or down based on the time you've got, but getting into that habit of always being proactive and always being helpful and doing the most important things you can do, not reactive, but proactive, that's when people will see success. So if folks do want more on that, bdhabits.com is the place to go. B for business, D for development, bdhabits.com. There's a whole 6-part course on it. It's 100% complimentary, worksheets, downloads, and it gives that exact process, but a whole lot more.
That's great. I love it. Okay, so failure. I mean, such an important part of this, right? It's business development is a little bit like baseball. It's you're everything you do isn't going to be traceable to revenue. Talk about psychologically dealing with the inevitable. I didn't win the pitch. I didn't get the deal. Talk about that.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll say 2 things. 1 is divorce yourself from the outcome, and 2 is learn from everything. So what we've got to do if we're on a project that never ends, and if we're always trying to get to that next plateau, tying back to the basketball story we had, we've got to divorce ourselves from the outcome. We have to keep focusing on what we can 100% control and trust the system that it will work out. It will work out. You're not trying to be perfect. You just have to be better than the other side, and they likely aren't doing this stuff. So you're way ahead right out of the gate just by doing something proactively. So divorcing yourself from the outcome is huge. The second idea, learn from everything. I don't care if you win. I don't care if you lose. You got to learn from everything. And not just the big pitches, but the steps along the way. So the simple process we use on our team is that every single break, after every single activity we work together, both BD and delivery, each person shares 2 things with each other. It's part of our culture. What's one thing I should keep? What's one thing I should change? And we find that construct deep, like a sports team when they're running off the field. It's between innings for the baseball team. You can see chatter in the dugout. Hey, I saw you did this. I think we ought to do that. They are helping each other succeed. They might not be following this exact construct, but you can see them giving very clear and direct feedback to each other, whether something went well or it didn't. And if we can do that in our business development and really in our delivery, what's one thing I should keep? What's one thing I could change? Every single time we have an interaction, we are climbing and getting better and learning, whether it's failure or whether it's success.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So a few quick exit questions. One is, we've talked about a few books already, but a book that you have read that may not be on topic, but inspired you and somehow fits into this journey you've been on.
Oh
Whether
man,
it's your, yeah,
there's so many.
yeah.
I'll tell you, I really liked Decoding Greatness by Ron Friedman. That just came out recently. That it is so good. It helps you have a structure to decode people that are great, or even products, physical items that are great at something. Decode how they did what they do, and then authentically make it your own. Really good stuff. Atomic Habits you mentioned is so darn good. In fact, James Clear and I have a podcast episode where we mash up Atomic Habits and Snowball System.
Yeah,
That's
I
pretty
watched
cool.
it.
We can put that in the show notes. I'm excited about Dory Clark's new one. It's not out yet. It's called The Long Game. It's how to network in a way, or it might be called the Infinite Game, but it's about how to network in a way that is optimizing for interesting to you, as opposed to optimizing like I'm trying to get something out of every interaction. I haven't read it because it's not out yet, but I'm excited about that. So there's 3 that are pretty darn good.
Those are great. I'm taking notes. Okay. A mentor, somebody who really changed you, somebody who challenged you, somebody who maybe it was through failure that inspired you to be better.
Gosh, a lot. I think I'll mention a guy named Dr. Russ Osmond. I got introduced to him. I hired him as a sort of a personal coach for about a year, and I went through a certification process to learn how people are motivated. And he instilled in me, and he beat me up pretty hard over a year to figure out what I'm about, why I do what I do, why I'm motivated, and what other people are motivated by. And it was through him challenging me, Craig, that there was hard parts in that. I wanted to quit at times, but it was through that challenge that I think made he made a big impact on me.
Okay, that's good. I need to look him up. All right, so the last point I want to make, maybe it's the wrong thing to end on, but it's really about ego death. So, what I see in business development is that people, as you said, are so associated with the outcome that it affects their ego, that they feel a sense of pain that they're not disassociated with. You've got, an extraordinarily high arrogance to excellence ratio. It's for me, a quintessential benchmark in people. Are they excellent? And then, are they arrogant about their excellence? And you are excellent, but I would call it a low ego factor in the sense of arrogance, right? Not in the sense of ego and its other definitions. Talk about, as a lawyer, in the case of a lot of people who might be watching this, or any professional service person, how do we have some ego death but maintain our confidence so that we don't feel the pain of every outcome the way people end up feeling it?
Yeah. I'll answer it this way. There's one of the top management consultants in the world has gone through our program. He's one of the big 3 management consulting firms. And I chatted with him about this once. And he said some people have given him feedback that he's not emotional, or when we get a loss, he doesn't experience it. And he did a whole bunch of psychometric testings around this, not just for that, but the result came out of it. And he said it's actually not true. He feels massive pain when they lose something that he wanted to win, but he feels it for just a few minutes. And he actually might cry. He's a very analytical person. He might actually feel the emotion so much about the loss, whatever it is. It could be a colleague leaving that he really wants to stay, or whatever. But he feels it really intensely, but quickly, and he gets up and he moves on. And he's tremendously successful at business development, one of the biggest advocates across their almost 2,000 partners for our program. But he feels, we all have egos. He almost, like, instead of deferring it, he allows himself to feel the emotion 100%. And what his version of that, I've tried to do this better myself lately, that allows him to move on faster. And I think that's part of his secret weapon. By always doing that, I think his ego is quite low, because we all have an ego. He really does want to win. He really does want to be the best of the best in the world, like literally in the world, is his expertise and his leadership skills and all that. But he really smashes that ego down by feeling the emotion and at the same time, like always wanting to get better, always feeling like there's stuff he doesn't know yet. I think those two things are really important. Feel the emotion, move on quickly. And two, really tell yourself, I do it every day. Like, I know nothing about business development. I've written a book about it. We've trained 20,000 people. At the same time, I really, truly feel like I'm just getting started. So telling ourselves that, I think, is really important, because what we don't want to do is that become that know-it-all, like you mentioned, where people, it's associated with less likability. People, they want the expertise, but they don't want to be around know-it-alls. So there's some kind of balance we need here. And I think the way you describe it is really, really good.
Well, it's the way you describe it. It's the growth mindset. Carol Dweck talks about, right?
Yes.
Not being in the mode of I'm fixed and everybody's grading me, but actually taking in the universe and being that baseball player on the bench, looking at the iPad and saying, oh, I see where they're pitching me inside, and maybe I need to step back a little bit. I mean, it's the how can I be better at life?
Yes.
All of the feedbacks we get are allowing us to be better at life. And in business development, you're actually exposing yourself more to those interpersonal things that as lawyers or actuaries, if you shut your door and you're working on a project for 12 hours and getting deeply analytical, you're not really exposing yourself to much feedback on that interpersonal side. So it's a fascinating, we could,
could I add one more?
Yeah, please.
Well, I'd love to do it again. I'm going to interview you on my show. I can't wait. But one thing your high level experts that are listening can do, real quick tip, and I touched on it before, but man, have I found this powerful. Every time after every interaction with people that are subordinate to you, with your peers, with people that are your bosses, ask them, hey, after that pitch, what's one thing I could change and what's one thing I could keep? I know we talked about that before. But the higher up you go in an organization, the less good feedback you get. And what we found is if you ask a broad question like, hey, how did it go? You'll just get accolades. They'll tell the boss, it was great, it was super. That might not be what they're thinking, but that's what they're going to tell you. So the only way we found to elicit really good feedback is to say, give me one thing to change and one thing to keep. At first, they'll test you. They won't believe it. They'll give you the thing to keep, and then they'll try to sneak away and not give you the thing to change. You have to go, no, I get the keep. That's great. What's the thing I should change? You have to pick one thing. You have to pin them down in the beginning. After they learn, you won't punch them, and lightning won't strike. The second time's a little easier. The 10th, they'll just tell you all kinds of stuff. And you have to keep doing that to keep growing. So we found that little trick works like a charm.
Well, it's so funny you say that. I this last week celebrated a dear friend's 50th birthday. We've worked together for 25 years. Her, Beth Petronio, and we went to Napa and had a great celebration with there were three couples, Dawn and me, and two other couples, including Beth and Dana, her husband, and. I did that with her. Like, she was the one person as I was becoming a leader and getting comfortable in the role that I could always go to and say, give me the feedback. And she kind of, I don't think, believed me at first either. And there was this one time after a presentation, and I thought I'd done a great job. And I went up to her and I said, okay, what could I have done better? And she said, why do you think you need to rely on notes when you give these presentations? She says, when you're speaking and you're not looking at notes, you are so much more connected to the audience. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, it was a revelation for me that, what do you mean? I'm going to forget something. She's like, you're not going to forget anything. Have you ever forgotten anything? You're not going to forget anything. And so, she always laughs at me because I go to Beth or my wife are the two people in my life who I can always count on getting that direct feedback. So that's why I was smiling so big as you were explaining that. You are fantastic. You bring so much positive energy to what you do. It's clear that you love what you do. We all have bad days, but when you work with people, you really take time to understand who they are as people. But you don't deviate too much from who you are, right? You're adaptive in how you help people grow, but who you are is so authentically real. And I just, it's so interesting to hear, coming from a town of less than 100 people, fixing the fence when no one's watching a dad who, loved doing certain things to the point of wanting to really master it. It makes you who you are. It's another little piece of the puzzle in the greatness of Mo. So thank you for doing this. I look forward to talking with you next week and many more years of our friendship.
Well, Craig, you exemplify mutually beneficial relationships, and I know you don't do it because the science says so. You do it because it feels right. But I think one of the reasons you are of many. One of the reasons you're so darn successful is you don't have 5 raving fans. You've got 5,000 across your firm and external partnerships and all these other things. And it's because you're always striving to help others. And that is, I know, come back to you 10, 100-fold. So I love being with you. I want to be on another one of these. I know you're going to be on my show. Talk about mutually beneficial. There you go. And I can't wait to flip the script. So look out because I can't wait to get into sheer big brain and really see from your perspective, how do you do all these things and keep going even when you have big trials, which I know you do. So thank you, Craig. I love being on the show. Can't wait to do more with you.
Thank you, Mo. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.